The air in that courtroom, it felt heavy, didn't it? Like the humidity before a Midwestern storm. My dad sat there, looking all polished in his charcoal suit, staring straight ahead like he was watching a documentary he'd already seen. His lawyer, a guy named Miller who smelled like expensive peppermint and ego, was pacing the floor. "Your Honor," Miller said, his voice smooth as Kentucky bourbon, "the facts here aren't exactly up for debate." He paused, letting the silence do the heavy lifting. The respondent, "She's a ghost. No tax returns for 5 years. No lease in her name. She vanishes for months at a time, leaving her son with his grandfather, only to reappear with no explanation and empty pockets." He looked at me then, not with anger but with a kind of pity. "That was the worst part. She has no employer, no fixed address, and clearly no defense." I looked down at my hands. They were calloused, the skin under my nails still stained with a faint metallic gray that no amount of scrubbing could fully reach. Beside me, my own lawyer, Sarah, was doodling circles on a legal pad. She knew what was coming, but she couldn't say a word. Not yet. The judge, a woman who looked like she'd seen every sad story in the tri-state area, leaned over her bench. "Ms. Weaver, do you have anything to offer the court? Anything at all to explain where you go when you disappear?" I opened my mouth, but the words felt like lead. How do you explain the unexplainable without breaking a dozen federal laws? Then the back doors of the courtroom creaked open. It wasn't a movie moment. There was no slow motion. Just a man in a plain, off-the-rack suit and a buzz cut. He didn't look like much, but he walked with a kind of don't touch me energy you only see in people who carry a heavy burden for a living. He didn't go to the gallery. He walked straight to the bailiff, handed him a leather folder, and waited. The judge took the folder. She opened it, and I watched her face. First there was confusion, then her eyebrows shot up, then she just stopped breathing for a second. She looked at the man in the suit. He nodded once. "Very professional, very cold." "Counsel," the judge said, her voice suddenly sounding very, very small. "Everyone, please, clear the room. Now." My dad looked confused. Miller started to protest. "Your Honor, we have a right to." "Out," the judge snapped. When the heavy doors clicked shut, and it was just us, the man in the suit finally looked at me. "Your Honor," he said, and his voice was like gravel under a tire. "The respondent's disappearances were actually highly classified deployments. She doesn't have a typical employer because her employer, well, technically doesn't exist on paper for security reasons." He turned a page in the folder. "The lack of a fixed address. That's because she was stationed in 3 different black sites over the last 24 months. The empty pockets. Her salary is held in a restricted government trust until her service contract is complete." He looked at the judge, then at me, with a tiny, almost invisible glint of respect. She wasn't being an absent mother. She was keeping the lights on for the rest of us. The silence that followed was different than the one before. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was hollow, like the world had just shifted an inch to the left. The judge closed the folder. She looked at me, and for the first time she didn't see a ghost. She saw a person who had given up everything, her reputation, her family's trust, even her own name, to do a job that nobody would ever thank her for. "Case dismissed," she whispered. I walked out of that courtroom 5 minutes later. My dad was standing by the water fountain, waiting to gloat. He opened his mouth to say something cutting, something about responsibility or growing up. I didn't say a word. I just walked past him, caught the eye of the man in the suit, and kept moving back into the shadows where I belonged. The ghost in the machine, a mother's secret life.